2 months after I started the startup, I was laid off because they got acquired, and they had the company that was acquiring us had somebody who was doing what I was doing. And so I learned, like, oh shit, I had no job security in startups, where I felt
Right.
like I at least had somewhat a little bit of my job security at Microsoft. And then I also learned that New York City, you could be around 8 or 12 million people, and it's the loneliest place in the world because everybody's just focused on what they need to do, where they're going. And it was I thought just a very terribly lonely place until I'd like met my wife and started building friendships and networks.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun at all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio & Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Dale Thomas. Dale is the founder of ActionableOps and an AI explorer focusing on leveraging artificial intelligence for small and medium-sized businesses. Dale is also the author of the best-selling guide, The Ultimate AI Guide for Small Business Success, designed to demystify complex AI concepts. Under Dale's leadership, ActionableOps provides AI-powered solutions like AI voice receptionists and AI readiness consulting, focusing on practical setup and clear pathways to return on investment for small and medium-sized businesses. You can learn more about Dale at ActionableOps.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Dale.
Dale, welcome to the Corporate Couch today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, no, great. Let's see, Jessica Powell, I'm a big connector in Kansas City, introduced us. So yeah, very excited to talk to you. We had coffee at Pilgrim Coffee in Overland Park. There's a referral fee. There'll be a link, affiliate link there. But yeah, so excited to talk to you. You're an AI expert, which is great. Ex-Microsoft guy, and also a police officer, which is a phenomenal story. We'll get to that, but
Sure.
yeah. So let's start with a fun question, Dale. Even people that know you fairly well, what one thing would surprise them about you?
What is one thing that would surprise them about me? Well, the people that don't know me really well or haven't been around, or even some people that do know me, didn't realize I had a background in law enforcement. So that could be one thing. Many people don't realize that even though I'm in Kansas City and I talk about barbecue, I'm like a Kansas City or a certified KCBS judge. So I do judge barbecue contests.
Wow.
So that's something a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
But
Wow. What was the craziest situation you were ever in when you were a police officer?
I've never brought it up on a podcast. So, the craziest thing is when I was policing in 2009, when we had 4 of our officers ambushed and killed in a coffee shop. It was insane just because of the events, the manhunt that took place after that, and then the international press that started focusing on the incident. It was something like 40,000 law enforcement officers attend the memorial, so it was just an absolutely insane event. And learned a lot, and it brought a agency together. Besides that, I think being shot at was a crazy event in the same city. So,
Right.
in a drive-by shooting with my partner and I, we were actually out at a fight one night at a club, um, and some gangbangers drove by shooting.
Wow.
So that was crazy.
Yeah. Wow. Well,
Oh,
two things. One, so sorry for your fallen colleagues. That had to be, horrendous. And two, I have interviewed Robert Abe Abrams, who was a 5-star general, 39-year military veteran. I asked him, well, like, what do people don't understand about war? And he goes, you can train all you want, but till you get shot at, that's when it all changes. So yeah.
definitely. And they always talk about train the way you fight. It's always about being prepared and train in realistic situations. And one of the greatest things, especially at my first agency, was one of my training officers always talked about the what if scenarios and constantly getting your mind prepared for what if this happens, what if that happens, and that's been just a um, kind of a game changer as far as how I approach policing in the 3 different agencies I was with.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I've have a couple cousins, and their sons have been officers, police officers. So, and a good friend of mine played Little League, went to school, elementary school through high school. He was the first
Right.
responder at 9/11. He was a local Peekskill where I grew up, police officer, and died of complications because of 9/11. So,
Oh, wow. Sorry to hear that.
yeah.
It was especially 9/11 that not forced me, but was kind of the turning point of it was time for me to start giving back and get involved. And I'd always wanted to be a cop, but I didn't think my background would allow it. But so I became a volunteer firefighter right after 9/11.
Wow.
Decided, or excuse me, not a firefighter, EMT for our local fire department. Decided I hated that, and then decided to start pursuing law enforcement.
Yeah, I was going to ask later, but it's probably a good time to ask. So when we had coffee, I didn't know, like, it's like, the Army has reserves and,
Yeah.
maybe other branches of the service, but police departments have reserves. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's changed over the years, and it's really depends on where you're at. On the West Coast, it seems like West Coast departments are more open to it, depending on the department. Some agencies allow you as a reserve to do absolutely everything. Some agencies just have you working in the jail, which is, I think, the case with like LAPD's reserve unit. Our agency, which I think I had the best of all worlds, is you had to do the same training as full-time officers, but they didn't want you to take lead on anything because of the union. You acted as a backup unless you were getting into your own activities. So
Right.
there's a phrase they used, if you catch it, you clean it. So, if you're out busting bad guys, then you're doing the reports and the arrests and taking them to jail and all that. So it was great that a lot of the times that our main job was to go back up other officers, and the city we were in, it was lights and sirens most of the time. So it was very exciting. Other agencies have their reserve units a little bit more community oriented. So you're working a lot of fairs, festivals. You're not out in the public as much, or out on like patrol as much. Then there's areas like NYPD where they don't really have a reserve unit. They have an auxiliary unit, but you're not armed, which is why when I moved to New York, I never participated in that. Uh,
Because you'd actually need to be armed if you're doing tough police work in New York City.
no, absolutely. And especially, if you're wearing a uniform that says NYPD on it.
Right.
Because, me as a trained law enforcement officer, when I first moved to New York City, I would see even the I don't want to call them meter maids, the traffic enforcement that were out
Right.
directing traffic, and it all said NYPD all over it, and none of them were armed, and I was always just amazed at that.
Right. Because everybody else is.
Yeah, exactly. Because bad guy's not going to go, oh, you're just a traffic.
Right.
They're going to go cop and
Yeah.
shoot. Yeah.
Right. Oh, geez. So let's go to something a little lighter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where'd you grow up, Dale, and what was fun for you growing up?
So I grew up in California up until I was from till I was about 20 years old. And fun for me was I was part of the music scene. I was playing a punk rock and rockabilly bands back in the late 80s, early 90s before I decided to move to Seattle.
Nice.
Uh, and it was just, fun to be living in that time versus I think there's so many different obvious changes nowadays with the technology and everything. And I think there was something to be said about living in the 80s when, you're a latchkey kid. And I was telling my wife yesterday, I would never tell my 9-year-old daughter that's when I was 9 years old, that's when my mom started leaving me home.
Right.
Well, she went to work in for the summers because I couldn't imagine, and just the
Right.
freedom we had, and the world was such a different place. There was negativity going on, but it was still a really kind of just
Yeah.
you were able to go ride your bike all day without the fear
Right.
of being abducted.
Right.
so
Yeah.
so it was fun times, and then moving to Seattle when I was 20, got really. It was right around when grunge was taking off. I was starting to promote bands and work with bands, so moved to Seattle, and that was a blast because I was able to get involved with the music scene, and it was everybody was signing record deals, and um, I was traveling a lot with one of the bands I was working with, and it was a great time to be able to be in a place like Seattle and
Yeah.
experience the Seattle music scene as it was happening and as the world was
Yeah.
looking upon Seattle. It was a fantastic
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. What a time to be there. I'm
Yeah.
picturing you as kind of the drummer / lead singer. Was that? Uh,
Not even. So when I played in bands, I played bass.
okay.
Uh, and that's actually when I discovered that I had horrible stage fright and I hated playing in bands, which is how I kind of gravitated towards the operational side or the management, the
Okay.
booking
Okay.
side, because I was not the guy to go on stage.
That's
Um,
funny.
our first, I don't know if are you a fan of like punk rock music? Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in that era, CBGBs
Oh yeah.
in this city, and the Ramones, and some of those classic pioneers in that genre. Yeah.
Yeah, so our very first show was that we did in my very first punk rock band. In our very first show, somehow we were able to get a supporting slot for this. There was a band called The Exploited, and they were from London. They were about the biggest hardcore band uh, at the time. And I just remember getting on stage, and this is probably what caused all the anxiety. And uh, there was just all of these big skinhead thugs in the front row, mean mugging you, throwing bottles at you.
Oh, jeez.
And I was afraid. I was like 13 or 14 years old, and I was afraid I was going to get my ass kicked the
Right.
entire show. So,
Yeah.
so
Probably
that
for
to
good
me-
reason.
right. It was just terrifying.
Yeah.
I've played in bands since then, and it's not as bad, but I'm just not I don't like the limelight on
You're
me.
not the front man for sure.
Definitely not. Well,
Any aspirations as a child growing up? Did and I'm an adult, I'm going to do this. Did you have any?
Well, so one of them was I always knew I was going to be in law enforcement, so that was part of it. And I remember telling at the time my grandmother back in the 80s. I remember distinctly telling her that one day I'm going to be rich enough, I'm going to buy a big house, and I kind of described this scenario to her, and she kind of giggled. And being the supportive grandmother as she was, I look at my life now, and everything I had described to her, I've achieved. So I've always had this kind of you focus on what you want, and whether you I mean what are they some people call it like a memory board or a
Yeah, vision board.
vision board.
Yeah, manifestation. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I haven't really been hardcore into that, but I've always
Yeah.
kind of believed that if those are the thoughts that you're putting in your head,
Yeah.
that's what you're going to manifest.
Yeah, I love that. So what was your kind of post high school life like, and as you migrated into kind of your professional career journey?
Post high school. So post high school for me was, I didn't want to go to high school, so I graduated high school early because my now my ex-wife, my first wife, had graduated high school early, and I just didn't want to be there because she wasn't there. And so I took my test. I got out of school. So I didn't have any big aspirations to go to college. No one I knew really went to college. Um, College was never discussed in my family. So it was all about trying to just get out and start working. And that's what I did. I was working as a cook. It was actually my ex-wife's family's restaurant and casino in the Sacramento area. And it was just all about working with the mindset of I really wanted to find a way to build my own business. And so that was always the goal, is to figure out how to build my own business. And back then we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the tools that we
Right.
today. So my first business at the time, I can't even remember all the details, was drop shipping products for mail order. And I was able to advertise in magazines and then do drop shipping of security products
Wow.
to households. So I launched my entrepreneurial career with a mail order magazine, mail order business back in the mid 90s. It was a really
Wow.
long time.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, that's some leading edge stuff. Love
At the
that.
time it was.
Yeah. So you're creating these small businesses type thing, knowing you want to, but then somehow you end up at kind of the mothership of companies. At least one of them, iconic Microsoft in Redmond. Talk
Yeah.
about how that happened.
So I had just moved back to Seattle. I lived in LA for a while, and then just decided that the music business was enough for me. Because I was living in LA with one of my bands, and we were traveling a lot, and I needed to grow up and get a real job. So moved back to Seattle. I started working in the hotel industry, and I needed to get a career. I'd always been interested in computers, so I learned how to fix computers. So I would buy crappy broken computers from the thrift store and start building them. I'd build out my own machines, and then I was self-taught in learning, taking it was called the CompTIA A+ certification. So I took that, and you're basically a computer break fix kind of hardware guy. And I started moonlighting for all the temporary agencies who were looking to hire contractors to do break fix type of work of like monitor replacements. I think my very first gig was replacing monitors at the Lincoln dealership in Seattle. And so I would just take any gig I can get for these temporary companies until one of them offered me a job doing break fix as a contractor for Boeing in Seattle. So I was able to, it was a lot of like memory replacement and it was all hardware for IBM machines. That led into a contractor role at Microsoft, which I thought was the brass ring. I figured I would somehow figure out how to get a full-time job. So I spent a year at Microsoft in the tablet PC group, which was, I say that it was like the Microsoft's original tablet, or original Surface PC, because it was way before iPads. It was the first tablet that I saw where you could draw on the screen or write on the screen and did handwriting recognition. It was right around when Y2K was taking place. So there was all eyes on what was going on around Y2K. And it was really cool because being in tablet, I would prepare demo machines for demos that the news would be watching. So I'd be giving hardware to Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates, and knowing that the tablets that I was giving them were going to be used to demo this prototype. Unfortunately, tablet PC never really took off, but I think Surface did. But it was just a great experience learning Microsoft, being a contractor at Microsoft, and then being able to parlay that into a full-time role at Microsoft.
Interesting. Did you have much interaction with Ballmer or Bill Gates?
No, I did not. They did not. I'm sure did not want junior level contractors.
Hey, Bill, why do you? I looked at your search history. Some of these websites, it's against company policy, that type of thing.
So we always had somebody who was more senior deliver the tablets
Right.
and machines to them. But
You worked on them, but the director or above delivered them, type thing.
Yes, definitely. But it was great because I got to know a lot of people that did interact with him. And Bill Gates had I think it was his chief architect, which was one of our former guys in our group. So I got to see him kind of be Bill Gates' right hand man when it came to technology, and so that was really interesting. And then what was really cool back in the day, and I don't know if you could still do it now. They had the Microsoft Conference Center, which was right across the street from my building on the Redmond campus, and it was really cool because we'd be able to get to go listen to Bill Gates give a talk on whatever he was talking about, and there'd be 100 or 200 people there. So you get to go front row to see Bill Gates speak. I was always more interested in watching and talking to his bodyguards and kind of seeing how they moved around the crowd. So
Right.
it was just a lot of fun to just kind of see that take place.
I'm surprised you didn't get a gig, a part-time gig, based on your police officer background. That's one of the
Well,
security.
so it actually did kind of transform into that type of role because I was hired in Microsoft, what they called Microsoft Ad Center, which was um, uh, how they displayed ads in like search engine marketing in the search results, and my job was to go after the bad guys who were trying to do either illegal things on the network or things on the network that we didn't want them to be doing, whether it was gambling or selling illegal items. So I got to put on an investigator hat. I got to work with the Department of Justice, preparing reports. And then one of the reasons they hired me was because I did have the law enforcement background and was able to kind of play in the seedier side of life and look at the kind of the gray areas and really decide, through the totality of the circumstances, whether there was something was a policy violation or not, and whether we should be going after it. And that, to me, that was the greatest job I've ever had.
Nice. Yeah. You're you're a tech guy. You love the kind of the investigation part and from your police officer passion. So yeah, that's fantastic. What was the culture like at Microsoft during your time you were there? Was it because you always hear about Microsoft versus Apple and all this, and they're in Redmond, everybody else, Facebook, Apple, all the tech companies are in Silicon Valley, but at that time.
The culture at the time was in the era of stack ranking. And are you familiar with kind of how that all worked?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So it became a difficult time because I was not one that, again, as we talked about, I didn't want to go be in the limelight. So it was never my priority to go get recognized. And the challenge there is, at least Microsoft at the time, if the executives didn't know who you were when it became review time and the stack ranking time, and the other directors or managers or whoever was in the secret meetings, it was hard to really shine unless your manager was there advocating for you.
Right.
And one of the reasons why I ultimately decided to leave is I was fortunate to get one of their highest rewards that you can get, and then 6 months later, I was given one of the lowest. Nothing had changed, in my opinion,
Right.
until I found out that my job had changed and no one had told me. So I'm like, how does that happen?
Right.
And so it's this, to me, it was this, I think it depends on what team you are on at Microsoft.
Yeah.
But at the end, to me, it was very cliquish, and it was
Right.
who you knew. And, it was, I don't want to make stuff up or read between the lines, so I don't want to start talking too negatively, but it just wasn't a good experience when I left. So when I had an opportunity to leave Microsoft and go in the startup space in New York City, it was the right timing.
Yeah, and I don't know if companies still do stack ranking, but for those who don't know what that is, it's basically employees that are in the same department get ranked from 1 to X, however many people, and yes, it's very political. And if you're not in the the in club, you're probably not going to get a good ranking. So
Absolutely. And then there was the mandatory, I think it was 10%, like 10% of the employees had to go in the bottom bucket.
Yeah, 10%, and usually those employees were let go. It was
Right.
like Jack Welch. Kind of he was a big proponent of that philosophy. So the thing I always thought about, because we did a sprint for a number of years, and what I don't like about it, like if my job as a leader is to hire A talent, like they're all A, but you can't compare the second baseman with the relief pitcher because it's a different job, right? So it's
Absolutely.
but they're still the best of what they do, so you can't rank them against each other. I don't know.
Yeah, I was never a fan of the stack ranking. I'm still not. I mean, because to your point, you were hired for a reason, and if that person's no longer performing, and they were an A player at one time, what's changed?
right.
And why aren't we? If we have a culture of support, why are we not reaching out to the employee to kind of trying to figure out what's going on and and see if there's something deeper? And maybe they're just not in the right role.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's like being
and
hired as on a football team as a punter, and then they change your rule. Now you have to be the field goal kicker. Well,
Absolutely.
yeah, you can't do that. So,
And sometimes that's kind of how it felt.
yeah,
So, and you never know until this is one of my challenges with working at any company is you just never know until you get in there if it's going
yeah,
to be a good fit or not.
100%. Yeah. So then, so you leave Microsoft. It looks like you traversed going across the country from Redmond, Washington to New York City. Looked like you, as a startup, what was besides you weren't happy, but could have probably found another job in Seattle, but you decided to go to New York.
I did. I thought going to New York would be a fresh start. I had just come off, whether it was, the issue at Microsoft or the issue I was talking about with friends in law enforcement passing away. And I had a mother who had died and an ex-father-in-law who had just passed. And I just thought I needed to get away from Seattle for a while because there was just too many negative things going on. So I went to New York City, and I was actually recruited by the same person who recruited me at Microsoft to go do all the in the advertising group. It was my manager who left to New York to go start at this startup called Clickable, and then once he got there, he recruited me to come leave Microsoft and work for him in New York City.
Wow.
So that was great.
So what? So here at Microsoft, one of the biggest companies in the world, probably at that time, probably today too. And you go to a startup. What was it like? Oh shit! I didn't know this was going to happen.
So, for me, I think it was trying to understand what a startup was and what that meant. And, fortunately, I thought a go-getter mentality, and I really wanted to just try to learn and be of value. And at a startup, especially I manage support teams and operations, it's all about wearing multiple hats and being able to just do whatever needed to get done. And which was a little different than Microsoft, where you're there for a specific job, and that's what your job is, and you're one of, I don't know, 150,000 employees, and so you're just really a number. Versus at a startup where everybody knows who you are, and every mess up that you do, everybody sees. And I actually like that because I thought it also built community, which it's hard to see at times at places like Microsoft, and you can learn so much more. Fortunately, my CEO at the time had his name's David Kidder, went on to found Bionic, which was acquired by Accenture a few years ago. But he also wrote the book, The Startup Playbook. So I was getting to be around all of these thought leaders and experts in building out startups, and to me that was where I started to, I think, really thrive. I've built some great relationships that are still in existence today from it. As a matter of fact, I'm talking to one of them now, my former boss, about doing a potential project together.
Yeah. So where were you fueling this kind of desire you've had to kind of create your own businesses? Were you doing side gigs, or was kind of that startup environment you felt like, because it was so small, you wore so many hats, just like you would if you had your own business without the security of obviously a paycheck? But were you doing things on the side?
So when I went to Clickable, I had just stopped. I was doing a lot of online advertising and doing affiliate marketing, which is was right in the domain of what we were doing at Microsoft as well. And that's actually one of the reasons, why they liked me or wanted me at Clickable, other than, the hiring manager was one of my former managers, is because I thought that the platform of this automated bid management tool that can optimize your campaigns was amazing. So I was very passionate about the project. So I'd always been doing some kind of side hustle. Um, because going back in the 90s, just a little bit, I started learning about, and I'm not saying I'm not a fan. I didn't drink the Kool-Aid, but people like Tony Robbins and kind of, being the person that you can do whatever you want to do, regardless what's holding you back or what limitations you think you may have. And to me, that really resonated. And there was this example, I think it was Tony Robbins or one of these people back in the day, where they had talked about like this jar of fleas. And if you put all these fleas in a jar and put the lid on it, the fleas will hit their head and they'll learn they can't fly out. So when you take the lid off the jar, the fleas won't jump out of the jar because they have a self-limiting belief that they can no longer do it.
Right.
And it was this really silly scenario that I'm like, life is like that. And so to me, it was just like, I can do whatever I want to do as long as I put my mind to it. And I really drank the Kool-Aid of thinking that way. And I'd always had this desire to have a lot of money and have all the things that, people think make success, and have a big house and the nice cars. And so it was kind of that driver to have my own business, which really kind of fueled everything else I was doing.
Right. Besides the going from one of the largest companies in the world to a startup, you go from Redmond to New York City. What was the kind of big aha there?
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts, he creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
You go from Redmond to New York City. What was the kind of big aha there?
2 months after I started the startup, I was laid off because they got acquired, and they had the company that was acquiring us had somebody who was doing what I was doing. And so I learned like, oh shit, I had no job security in startups where I felt like I at least had somewhat a little bit of my job security at Microsoft. And then I also learned that New York City, you could be around 8 or 12 million people, and it's the loneliest place in the world because everybody's just focused on what they need to do, where they're going. And I thought just a very terribly lonely place until I'd like met my wife and started building friendships and networks.
Sure. And your walking pace picked up when you moved to New York City too.
But I like that. So I did kind of adopt to the New York mentality of, come on, get out of my way. I'm trying to get somewhere. Stay away from Times Square at all costs.
Right. Yeah. Native New Yorkers do not like Times Square. The tourists are just, walking, looking, and it's,
And all you're trying to do is get home, get to your train, get to your meeting. So I really gravitated, and my wife and I still talk about it. She lived in Brooklyn for 30 years. And so she gets it that, we live now in Kansas City, but we lived in Atlanta and in Seattle, and all these different places have their cultures. And half the times I really resonate with the culture that was in New York City, where everybody just, knew where you stood with everybody. And some places like Kansas, everybody's very polite, but they won't always tell you exactly what they're thinking.
Right.
And in the South, in Atlanta, they'll, even if they don't like you, they'll just bless your heart and just tell you, be nice to you. So,
Right.
and so in New York, I can appreciate the direct
Yeah.
directness of everybody. Now, of course, once we adopted our little girl and living in New York City, we had to move because it was just too stressful to try to take a stroller up and down the subways and when it
Yeah.
was low in the snow or the heat when it was just a nightmare to try to raise families in New York City.
Yeah.
At least.
So did that prompt your move from Brooklyn to Atlanta then? And why Atlanta?
Well, that was one of the reasons. So my wife at the time was EVP of sales for a data center company, and they had a small office in Jersey City. So she would go there, and her entire team, or at least to my recollection, was based in Atlanta. So she was always going to Atlanta, and she would sit by herself in her office in Jersey City. And I don't want to take all the credit, but I always believe that out of sight, out of mind. If your leadership doesn't see you and if your employees don't see you, they just learn to adapt to work without you. And so, I don't want to say I talked her into it because I think she saw a lot of value, but it was a lot of my disdain for living in New York City and the stress of living there that we actually just decided, well, why don't we just move to Atlanta part-time? Let's get a small house there and we'll go there every, couple times a month and stay a couple weeks. And that's what we did. And after a while, we just decided to, traveling with a newborn was a big hassle. So we just decided to call Atlanta home. And we still kept our New York place, but I think my wife's career started, again, I'm not taking the credit for it. It was starting to thrive just because she was getting a lot of visibility with our CEO who was living here in Kansas City, and which is what prompted us to move to Kansas City was the CEO calling. And I remember my wife calling me and said, the CEO and his wife just pulled her aside and asked her if she would want to step up and be the chief people officer. And we thought that was an amazing, tremendous opportunity to be, getting a seat at the C-suite is not an easy task. And my wife, had never done people services, so it was a new experience, and we'd have to move to Kansas. And I had 2 retail businesses at the time that were their franchise, and the franchise itself was not doing so great. So I had these 2 businesses that I just really wanted to dump. And so that was my excuse on why I had to dump the businesses. Well, I got to move to Kansas. So I was just hot to trot on getting out of that and dumping these businesses.
Yeah. I had a small franchise myself back in the day. Yeah, it was a very interesting experience. A lot of learnings for sure.
A lot of learning. I don't think I'd ever do it again, but especially for an unproven franchise. But we thought we were getting on the ground level. It was a technology franchise, and be great.
Yeah. You probably remember Inches Away.
No.
They were kind of a women-only kind of exercise facility. They were like top franchise multiple years in a row. This was probably in the 2000s, early 2000s. Grew crazy. Well, I didn't have one of those. I had a company that was created many moons before Curves, called Inches Away, and it was not that good.
I remember Curves. Not that I went, but I remember it.
Curves was you couldn't go because you're a man. But it was a women-only franchise called Inches Away, and it was anyhow. I digress there. So let's not talk about me. So
That's all right. That's all right. I think the franchising space is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And for a while I'd done like network marketing, and one of the things that I loved about those type of businesses is at least the thought of getting this playbook and these guides on how to run it. So it was just this blueprint to success, supposedly.
Yeah. So it looks like you moved to Kansas City. You're all in on your own business now, ActionableOps. Talk about that, and also how you became an expert in it in the AI space, and published your first book about the Ultimate AI Guide published last June of 2024, I believe.
Sure. Yeah, it was published a year ago. It's completely out of date. So people won't buy it since it's out of date. And I'm on the fence on whether I want to try to update it or not. But the one thing I want to always try to address is the term expert. I never consider myself an expert. I certainly don't think I'm an expert, especially in AI, because there are people who have been in this space on machine learning and artificial intelligence for years and years and years, who I consider experts. I'm more of an explorer, is the term I've adopted, um, where it's a new technology for many of us, and I'm just exploring the possibilities of it. I lean to the expertise, or excuse me, lean towards the explorer versus expertise. AI still, I think, is kind of the Wild West, where we're just kind of everybody's just trying to figure it out. And the technology is changing so fast that I think unless you are a true expert, it's just really hard to be an expert, at least right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's incredible the progression and of where it was 3 months ago versus now,
Right?
definitely a year ago, and I definitely have gotten. I started playing with it probably about 18 months ago, and it's amazing. But yeah, I'm a neophyte in the space for sure. But what do you think people? I know your company supports and helps small to medium-sized businesses. What do you think the business owners and the people you can help in those companies? What's their kind of biggest fear or misconception about AI?
Well, I think, there's a couple different things. So, as far as like a fear of AI, one, I don't think, well, if it's used properly, I don't think AI uh, is an evil being. Of course, it can be used for negative things, but I think it could be a tremendous tool. And excuse me, I think a lot of business owners focus on AI's ChatGPT. Well, ChatGPT is one little tiny part of the whole AI ecosystem, and um, and I think once business owners start seeing there's other opportunities to leverage AI, especially around conversational AI or voice AI, which is really where we're focusing on, which is um, AI that answers your phones. Because my biggest pet peeve with companies is their IVR systems and these broken ass IVR systems that you can never get to the person you want. You're frustrated by yelling, speak to a receptionist or an individual, or and I was on the phone, I forget who it was, with Amex or Delta or somebody over the weekend. I'm just screaming at my phone, speak to a representative. And it was forcing me to tell it what it wanted me to talk about, or what it was forcing me to tell it what it wanted to talk about. And I was just so frustrated. Where AI doesn't do that. And it knows that it can transfer your calls, or it can do anything you really want it to do. And that's what I think is great about workflows and AI agents is if you can think it up, you can do it. And
Right.
that's really the magic. And that's where I'm focusing. So we're giving a lot of workshops to small business owners. And part of what I'm trying to do is show what you can do with AI, especially around voice. That is not like ChatGPT. So I'm showcasing all these different tools that and that they can use for their business. And one area that I'm doing that is I recently kind of reevaluated my business. I wanted to take a look at who my ideal customer was. So I leveraged a lot of different tools from Perplexity's deep research, which Gemini can do. And if you've never used like the deep research function of some of these different tools, it's absolutely amazing. And so, you can get it to do all of your research on your deal customer profiles, your total addressable markets, which I fed into another business plan tool called Idea Buddy. And I would go back and forth all these different tools and feeding the output from these AI tools into Idea Buddy and another tool called Mavic.ai, which helped me create my brand personas. And it did a lot of the heavy lifting. Now, AI, you can rarely just have it give you the output and just it's like production ready. You always have to go in and massage it and review it and make sure it's accurate. And I was able to do that with so much with all these different tools that I built my business plan with different AI tools, built my new customer profile, built my marketing strategy with different AI tools, including Text Cortex. And then I put all of this information into a knowledge base, which was just a folder that lives inside Text Cortex. And now I can interact with Text Cortex and my folder about my business. And I can ask it, okay, well, who's my ideal customer profile? And let's come up with a marketing strategy just for, let's say, home services. And so it's very hyper focused on me because it understands my brand, it understands my business. It has scraped all the pages on my website, so it knows my website. And then speaking of website, I was able to, with the use of Text Cortex giving me the output, come up with these really deep prompts that I would put into a tool called Replit. And Replit is part of this whole new vibe coding tools that are out there. And there's like Replit, VO, lovable.dev, and bolt.new or bolt.diy, where you can give it a prompt like go create a tic-tac-toe game, and it will create an application that's a tic-tac-toe game. But I was able to leverage that, and I built my entire ActionableOps website based off of prompts. It still took a couple weeks to do because there was a lot of back-end work that I was doing and some database work. But I rebuilt my entire website using AI tools to help write the content, to help come up with the images for the website, help come up with the marketing strategy for it. And so now we've deployed it. Now, since then, I am moving it back to WordPress. And so we're currently in the process of getting it converted back to WordPress.
Interesting. So I'm familiar with most of the things you talk about, but talk a little bit more about Text Cortex.
So Text Cortex is one of my favorite platforms. Now, everybody, like I said, heard of ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini. So what Text Cortex does, and the reason I started using them was I was looking for something where I could interact with my customer files. So I had a client who was a professional athlete, and I wanted to put some of his files there so I could interact with it. But privacy was a huge concern, security was a huge concern, and being able to have a knowledge base of some kind. I think that all these different tools do it, but Text Cortex a couple of years ago was the only tool that was doing it at the time. And so Text Cortex, you can go and prompt with it just like you can with ChatGPT. You can create, I think they're calling them agents now, but a persona. So you can have a marketing persona that is just a prompt that is specific to marketing. You can have one for accounting, whatever you want. I have a ton of different personas. And then you can figure out which model you want to use. So you can have it do Claude 3.7. You can have it do GPT 4.0 mini, whatever the model is. So you get a variety of different tools to choose from. And I think what also makes tools like Text Cortex special is they're based in Germany. So they have the GDPR privacy requirements, but they also have German privacy requirements, which is even more strict than GDPR. And of course, US has very few privacy requirements, especially around this space. But there was the privacy of and security of use in Text Cortex. But the other thing was the information that you're providing, it didn't train the models like the GPTs from OpenAI or Anthropic. And the thing that people don't realize, when you go to ChatGPT, and I don't use it, so they may have changed it or there may be a new setting. At the time, if you were to put in your entire, I don't know, your will and your estate information into it to have it explain things to you, all that information would train the model. So somebody else can come along and get access to your information in theory. But when you were doing it through the APIs like Text Cortex and some other different tools, it never trained those models. Now I know ChatGPT, you can go into their settings and turn off the ability to train their models, but I don't know if a lot of people know that now or not, but at the time they didn't. But then you didn't have histories to your chats. That was one of the downsides. You couldn't see what your chat history looked like,
right?
Which I think is sometimes very important. So to me, it was like Text Cortex was the best of all worlds. It also included, they have their own Chrome plugin. So you can get it to do your rewriting in Gmail or different websites. It could scan websites, summarize them for you, and so you can interact with it. So it's this suite of tools. And then the other reason why I'm a big fan of Text Cortex, and there's other tools out there like getmerlin.in, which I also use, but not nearly as much as Text Cortex, is their leadership team is goes above and beyond. They are so customer focused. I have conversations quite often with their both of their co-founders and several of their different leaders in the organization, because they want to know how users are using their tools. They care about their users. If I file a bug, they will ask me directly about the bug. They'll ask me directly about features I want to see, and they'll implement many features I've asked them to, feature requests that I put in. So they're very responsive, where I've seen CEOs and leaders of small startups who refuse to talk to their customers. And I'm even dealing with one now that I bought their product and I had some very specific feedback I was trying to give. They won't even reach out to me.
Huh.
So it's just very frustrating.
It's amazing. Oh God. Yeah, just a brief aside about the IVRs. They're the worst thing possible. Most IVRs, they're terrible. I ran one of my functions was customer service at Aratona Therapeutics. We were late stage animal health startup. I was there from 2014 to 2019, and I said, we are picking up the phone. Like, we only had like 2 customer service reps and a customer service manager, so we had if somebody wasn't available, go to next, and so only 3 people. But we're picking up the phone, and they'll leave a voicemail. We'll call them right back. But it's so stupid. Like, yeah. And I love that they record. Because you're like, I want to speak to a rep. I told you.
And then and of course, what amazes me is that people still do this, and companies still embrace it. You're frustrated and all pissed off, and you finally get on the phone with the rep, and the first question is, how's your day going? One, you don't care. And 2, I'm frustrated as all hell. So why are you asking me? Now, of course, my wife's a big believer of, you get more flies with honey. So I try to, pretend like I'm not as pissed off as I am.
That's admirable, since she lived 30 years in Brooklyn. So she's very evolved then. To think that
Very
way.
much so.
Dale, I know your company helps. I think you have some verticals that you focus in. What are some of those?
Yeah. So when I was talking about we wanted to take a look at our entire business and really wanted to start focusing on verticals, because we did what every business wants to do, and it was basically like, we'll help anybody's business who needs help. And then we saw our own challenges with that on trying to provide different custom solutions across multiple different industries. And we saw some of the challenges with that. So we went back to the drawing board and then started focusing on 3 different verticals: home services. So the home plumbers, electricians, dog walkers, or anybody who has a business focusing on home services. And then professional services, which also would include like your attorneys, your CPAs, people of that nature. And then and while it could fall into professional services, we broke out real estate services, because we can offer some unique tools for real estate agents, especially around some of the different voice AI and being able to help all of these people who are in the field, who can't always answer their phones, who can't always schedule their own meetings, nor should they have to, seeing how when somebody calls in, 90% of the questions are the same thing, redundant, that a friendly AI chatbot could answer for them. And then we can, schedule these services for these people, or talk to them about different homes that are available and on the market, and do a lot of the pre-qualification for sales and lead qualification.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So if you're a realtor, like the AI voice bot would actually use, like if I'm a realtor, use my voice in terms of the prompt. So it's kind of emulating a conversation with me, but it's automated, obviously, or how does that work?
Yeah, in theory, you can do that. We offer probably 30 different voices that they can choose from.
Okay.
But you could do your own voice.
Right.
No one is, we haven't been asked to do it yet, but I'm sure it'll happen.
Yeah, I was just curious. Yeah.
Sure. Right now, the technology is getting a lot better, but you can still kind of tell that it's AI. And so if you ask any of our chatbots and voice receptionists, if it's AI, she'll come right out and say, "Yep, I'm an AI here to help you."
Yeah.
So.
is it celebrity voices? So I can use like Ryan Reynolds or George Clooney or Brad Pitt in my,
No, we don't do that. But I did. What was it called? No, whatever. There was a tool that I bought, Speechify, I think it was. That I'm a big fan of audio, and I like listening to things as I'm driving. So I bought Speechify. I think it's Speechify.ai. As I was writing my book, because I wanted to listen to my book as I was driving and think about it and figure out how I wanted to re-edit it. And there you could get Gwyneth Paltrow, Snoop Dogg, or Mr. Beast to be your voice.
wow, nice.
So I got Gwyneth Paltrow because I just couldn't tolerate Snoop Dogg reading my book back to me.
Good choice. I like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I love helping two groups of people. One's the recent college graduate. We're recording here June 3rd, 2025. So in May, a lot of people, young adults, graduated from college. What advice would you give them as they kind of navigate their professional career journey, get that first job, and using AI?
I would say embrace AI as much as you can now. Learn the ins and outs of it. Learn some of the ethics around using it and using it with some guardrails in place, because more businesses will continue to adopt AI. I think AI will may replace some jobs, and so these people that are learning AI, as long as they're becoming more proficient with AI tools, I think the more valuable they will become, because we will always need people to be able to go in and work with the AI, or whether it's through prompt engineering or other tools, just like developing the website with AI. I could give it a prompt, I could develop a website, but at the end of the day, if it's broke, if my website stops working and the tool cannot fix it, which it has, then what do? You got to have somebody who has that deep knowledge. So the interesting thing is, I mentor up at UMKC, University of Kansas City, Missouri, in their entrepreneurial program, and I see a lot of kids resistant to AI. There are a lot of students, or not all kids, but a lot of students they don't want to embrace AI. And to me, it's just like any other tool that's out there. It's a tool like spell check, and if you have an Alexa, or if you have like Google Drive or Android Auto on for your car, or Apple CarPlay, that all uses AI. So most people already use an AI.
Right.
So it's not this. I don't think it's this big scary thing, as long as you're kind of exploring the tools and taking advantage of it. So people coming right out of college, I would think, start leveraging these tools. I'm not saying write your paper or don't get AI to write your job resume, because employers can see through that, but learn how to use these tools where they're a value add.
Right. That's great advice. How about those people that they start their career and they want to take the next step and want to lead a group of people and be responsible for them, so they become a first-time manager? What advice would you have for them as they begin that leadership journey?
Be the manager you want to be. Be the manager that you respect. So when you think about what type of leader that you value, become that person. I've had leaders where they're very charismatic and they were very articulate, that you just naturally want to do things for them because of how they treated you, and they always made you feel valued. I've also had managers that would throw things at your door and yell at you and just berate you. You got to think about what kind of manager you want to become. And for a while, not that I went down the path of throwing things, but I had a more aggressive style. But I also, when I got into managing kids or college students for my franchise, and really trying to kind of think, okay, what kind of person did I want to be? What kind of leader did I want to be? Taking a different approach, and come from a place of, how can I help this person become the best person they can be? And one of the things that I would do, and if you're getting into leadership, I encourage you to do it as well. If you're managing people, don't hold them back. If they're in, I don't know, if they're in software testing and they want to become a developer, don't force them stay in software testing just because you're afraid to lose a good person.
Right.
Embrace that the fact that you want to help them get to that next level. One of the greatest achievements that I have with some of my former employees at my old franchises, when I look at their LinkedIn pages now and I kind of see the path they've taken, I knew I helped them get there. I'm not saying I gave it to them or it was all because of me, but I could see what they're doing was partially also because I allowed them to build their skills. I allowed them to take ownership of the business and different areas of the business and to grow their skills, even if they had never done it, because that's what they wanted to do. So I always tried to figure out what that employee really wants to do and then help with them with those skills, even if it cost me a little bit of extra money to do it. Because if they're in technology and they want to learn operations, to me, that was very important to help them grow. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, you have to meet them where they want to go, because there's no sense trying to keep them in their current position if that's not what they want to do, right? So, right. Yeah, no, I love that advice. Dale, thank you so much for being on the Corporate Couch this morning. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Of course, yes, it was a lot of fun, and I appreciate it.
It's great talking with Dale. Yet another guest on the Corporate Couch that no college, had this kind of Tony Robbins mindset, very goal-oriented, wanted nice things for himself, and eventually, having a family and wanting nice things for them, kind of the thoughts become things type of person. But, I call him an AI expert, and he goes, well, I'm not an AI expert. I'm an AI explorer, which I love that term. That was cool. But then, he reeled off like 10 different AI platforms that I'd never heard of, which, Idea Buddy, he mentioned a lot about Text, Cortex, and a multitude of others, Speechify. But yeah, it was very interesting. It got me into some other things I haven't, stack ranking, hardly ever done anymore, but that was a fun conversation to talk about that. And then, of course, one of my favorite corporate topics, IVR hell that companies put you through. I thought that was, it was just a very interesting conversation with Dale. Joe, what did you get out of the conversation?
It was very interesting. I think he was the first person that we've had that has written a book, but didn't want to promote it on our podcast, right? He said, yeah, I wrote a book. It's completely out of date. It's only been about a year or something. And that doesn't speak so much to him as an author or the quality of the book. That speaks to the nature of the Wild West of what is AI. AI has exploded so much in the last year or so, even. If I look backwards, what I was doing with AI just a year ago, and compared to what I'm doing with it now, it's just absolutely amazing. One of the things that scares me, frankly, about AI and how fast it's progressing right now is how fast it's progressing in things like generative video, where you can now take a video of anybody, of a movie star, or politician, or anybody, and get them to say the exact opposite of what they would have said normally. So you can get them to promote your product, or to promote your political viewpoint, or get them to lie about something. And that technology technically has been around for actually a decade or more, but it's never been in the hands of individual people. So that you can,
like I can even do it.
You can do it on an iPad, right? Without any problem. And the quality is such that it's literally admissible in court, which is scary, because now you can take a witness and get them to say the exact opposite, say that it's on this video deposition, play it for a jury, and get them to say anything you want them to. So it's a scary thing. I think AI in general is, but especially the Wild West version of it. The thing that bothers me a little bit is that a lot of people will say, well, that means that we ought to have more regulation on it. But I'm scared to death to have the government come in and do something, because I don't think they know what they're doing any better than we do. So it's interesting to see how this is all going to play out over the next few years.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I'm surprised with your musical talent and background. You didn't mention that he was in the grunge band scene in Seattle.
He was a musician and law enforcement.
Yeah, reserve police officer. That's cool.
Yeah. It was an amazing story. Amazing story.
Yeah, Joe, what advice do you have for our great listening audience today?
It's not advice this time as much as just a story, because I wanted to let you know that I needed a new pair of shoes. So I went to the mall yesterday to go shopping for shoes. And a lady was helping me, and I was trying on a pair of shoes, and she said, how's this pair of shoes? And I said, well, they're too tight. And she said, well, try it with the tongue out. And I said, well, it's no good, they're filthy tight.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.